And I hope it continues. But today I'm here to talk about thinking and talking about careers for linguists. So that sort of divides this session into two parts. The first part is thinking about career, and the second part, talking about career. And this is based on my new book, which I have here also somewhere for my reference. Yeah, you might see me poking around in it a little bit. The book's been out just a few months, and I'm still finding new ways to think and apply the concepts that I explore. But here's a big one. So you may have received this question. In my experience, this can feel like it looks here, like an old-fashioned frame, a frame that kind of doesn't fit right. It feels clunky, it feels awkward. Has anyone been asked this question? And if folks want to chime into the chat, I'd love to know also how you answered it. If you could ask this question. What can you do with a degree in linguistics or a degree in applied linguistics? Any reactions to that question? I'd love to hear. Yes, we've been asked this question. How did you handle it? How does it feel? What do you do with it? Am I right that it feels a little clunky? Oh, military. Yes, you get that a lot. That's probably one of the best known applications of linguistics. Did someone come off mute? Someone says, sometimes I don't respond. Yeah. I'll admit this person. Tech language teacher. Okay, great. Well, you guys are navigating this question well. The task, I think, is to take this frame and, discard it. Find your way into a new frame. And I think this is helpful for career seekers too, is to start the question from a different place. What do you want to do? And then think about how linguistics can get you there. And this is in line with advice that you would get in the classic, what color is your parachute? That's the job seekers Bible. And advice like you see here from Howard Thurman, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And I don't know, for me, that's a little bit hard to answer just off the top of my head. What makes me come alive? I think it's a process. And in this new book, what I'm exploring is a metaphor to kind of help you with that process. So the metaphor is, as you see here, stars in the night sky. They become constellations when you've had a chance to kind of reflect on them and organize them and identify them. But you first start with bright spots. So, as Howard Thurman said, start to figure out what makes you come alive. I'm going to be asking you as we start talking here to be making notes of things that make you come alive. You can pop them in the chat. There'll be a moment where I'll ask folks to share any that they've identified. Maybe you sort of find some when you're listening to talk or you're listening to a classmate talk. Maybe you've even seen some of the sparks happening in the chat, military or language teaching, working in tech. These are all ideas. Some of them might strike you as, something I want to learn more about. So, as I say, we're going to be thinking and talking about careers for linguists. So one of the ways that I think to help you think, the best ways that I think helps you think, is to learn where others have found professional application of skills and training. In other words, go find the linguists, go find the applied linguists. What are they doing out there in the world? And, expand your horizons. This fits with the metaphor, right? Take a broad view. You can't map a constellation with one star. Ideally, you need hundreds and maybe thousands of stars. It behooves you, it benefits you to learn, to think expansively and learn as much as you can about career. And then the second part of today, we'll spend some time talking about talking, because I think as linguists, as people who've studied language and communication and culture, we have an advantage because we can think about our talking. We can talk about our talking when it comes to the texts and interactions that comprise the job search. And, that is, everything is changing about the world of work, but one of the things that doesn't seem to change is that you do always kind of have to create a resume. And why not bring your awareness of language to documents like this that you prepare to talk about yourself? So this is my plan for today. We'll first work with a acronym that will help you hopefully uncover some of your sparks, or uncover some potential sparks, something that you might want to learn more about. The acronym that I work with in chapter 2 of this book, Brighten. I hope that we can reframe in the way that we just saw. One of the things that I hope that reframe does is make you see that you're in the driver's seat. You have agency, you have choice. Think about career as a research problem, and you've been being trained as researchers. So you have the skills, you have what you need to tackle a multifaceted, research question like what's something that might speak to me and make me want to devote my time and energy to it now for the next chapter of my life. Oh, and I guess I'll say, if you're not talking, could we have you keep yourself on mute just to avoid background noise? And then I'm going to leave you with some resources. If we don't get through all of them, you will have a copy of this presentation. Resources are at the end. Just lots of places to go, things to think about as you think and talk about career. And I hope this is something that isn't just today, that today we start, but this is a process that will continue. So I want to encourage you to, as something lands, if 2 weeks from now you have a question, send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love thinking and talking about careers. So make this be the beginning of a conversation, not the end. So Brighten, this is my acronym. This is derived from years of working, decades of working with linguists. It's not exhaustive, but it is a place to begin a conversation. And it's also a way to do what you may have noticed it on my slide. I skipped over it actually, talk optimistically. This is a way to talk optimistically. So if you do get that question, what can you do with a degree in linguistics, a degree in applied linguistics? You can say, well, there's lots of things you can do. I learned about this acronym, Brighten. You could work in business, you can work in research. In this acronym, I have I standing for ingenuity. It could also stand for a lot of other things. It's a versatile letter, I. Government, healthcare, communications, technology, education, and nonprofits. So those are at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 answers to the question, what can you do with a degree in linguistics? And again, I'm going to send you these slides, so don't feel like you have to furiously scribble down. But I'm going to go through them. I'm going to go through them with some of the stories that I share in this book. There's 40 stories in here of linguists and people who don't call themselves linguists, but do work in language and culture and communication. And so I think that they're employing linguistics, whether or not they think they are. So business, here's a few of the organizations that I tell stories about. But some of the things that are interesting about these companies, so Nike, we know Nike, but the linguist who I know who works there, she works in corporate social responsibility, which is a domain of work that I have to say I didn't know a lot about before she started working there, but it's a way to do good and be part of a force for good. A lot of organizations have a corporate social responsibility arm, and you can kind of, in some cases, it's kind of like a nonprofit piece of a business. She was hired for Nike because she's an athlete. They love to hire athletes because of all the like skills and teamwork and drive and collaboration and cooperation that being an athlete entails. But I think that a lot of organizations are like that. You just kind of have to figure out what do they value. They're likely to hire you like the person if they feel like you're going to be you have the kind of qualities that they are looking for. My first job, I was hired at Goldman Sachs. I studied English and Spanish. I didn't expect to be going to work in the investment banking sector, but it turns out that what they were looking for was someone who was, curious and a flexible thinker and a good communicator. And they had this initiative. They didn't know what it was going to be, but it was going to be in Latin America. So they knew they needed somebody who was aware of language and culture. And, my interview basically was just kind of seeing how adaptable and flexible and creative I was. Yeah, Catchword. I don't know if people have heard of Catchword. That is a naming firm. I don't know if people know about the world of naming. That's probably one of the first worlds of work that I learned about. Catchword was founded by a linguist who was halfway through grad school and then started, finding that she was more and more excited about work in naming. So that's a whole world for folks to find out about if that sparks your curiosity. But they often do, put out job ads for linguists because they want people who are trained in semantics, pragmatics. They, if you're naming a product, you want to make sure that that name does things. So it's a lot of pragmatics. They hire a lot of language experts too, because they want to make sure that, in one language, the brand name doesn't mean it's opposite. It's apocryphal. This isn't actually a story that happened, but you might have heard the Chevy Nova. It's not a true story, and Laurel will tell you about it, but that's what you don't want. You don't want a car to have, the meaning I don't go, that would be bad. Multilingual Connections is the logo in the middle here that was formed by a linguist. I tell her story in my book. One of the things that I love in her story is she says the thing that she loves is creating jobs for linguists. So I want to celebrate anybody who has that attitude. Her business, speaking of adaptability, has changed over the years. She started doing like cross-cultural communication and, training for organizations that were multilingual. And then over the years, she's kind of focused in on translation and interpretation. But, the business could pivot again. There's always change. That's the one constant. GDIT I included here just because when I taught a course back in the day. I used to run a master's program for folks that was an applied sociolinguistics master's program. And one of the first things I had students do in the professionalization seminar was choose one thing to focus on, one world of work. And I had a student, I tell his story here in chapter 2. Matt would not choose. He was interested in everything and wanted to learn about everything. And the more I made him choose, the more committed he became to the idea that he didn't want to choose. And actually, as it turned out years later, he's become a proposal writer for General Dynamics Information Technology. That's a huge employer in the federal contracting space. His job is to write proposals. And as it turns out, the probably the #1 attribute of somebody who's going to be writing proposals for work is that that person must be very curious in everything. They are, Judith, are you having trouble? I'm seeing, did my screen go away? Are you having trouble? Oh, echo. Do you want me to continue? No. Should I phone in?
Is this better? Yeah?
Yeah,
You
that's,
can hear me better?
Much better.
yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll put my headphones on.
Gotta love technology.
Good? Okay. So give me a wave if you're not hearing me or we run into another problem. All right, yeah, business. We've covered a lot of ground with business. Research here, I'll just mention what has, over my research lately, become kind of the most interesting to me, but also I find that I'm asked about this all the time, user experience research. There's actually a session happening right now at San Jose State University. They're going through all the things that just happened at the American Anthropological Association conference, including a lot of people who are user experience researchers. So if you're someone with a background in anthropology, sociology, linguistics, user experience are hiring a lot of folks with this skill set. And as you go through the research process, these are all on the right-hand side, some of the technologies and the methodologies that they use. But if you start learning about them, you start to realize that a lot of these are a lot of the methods that we learn as researchers. We're quite adaptable as linguists. I think we can really pivot to fit tool to task in many cases. And when people find out that we're trained like this, I think they really feel like we are, we're versatile, we're valuable because of our versatility. And so, if you find that you're interested in user experience research, you want to learn more, one of the things to learn about is just all these different like user testing, user scenarios, user experience maps, usability tests, and start learning how the research that you're currently doing could be described using the language of user experience research. I have so many people, in fact, of the people that I spoke with are doing user experience research. I ended up creating a whole chapter for that. Chapter 3 is all about user experience research. I said could stand for a few things. It could also stand for internships, which I would encourage folks to do if they're able. While you're in school, getting an internship is a great thing. I was lucky, and I did a lot to make myself lucky to get an internship with McNeil Air Productions when I was at grad school. They were filming Do You Speak American at that time, and I ended up getting a job working as an intern on the website side of the project. So this website, it still is up. It hasn't been updated in many, many years, but there are tons of resources there still. If anyone wants to use that film in their classroom, there's a lot of pedagogical materials up on this website. And in some ways, we had to sort of correct some of the, I don't know if people have seen this film, in the efforts of being a journalist, at sometimes the voice of the film kind of tries to find counterpoint to a lot of ideas. So, you know, they found a linguist who said multilingualism is amazing and it's a wonderful thing. So then they went and sought out somebody who would say multilingualism is a threat. And they gave that person equal airtime, and in some cases really stoked some really awful ways of thinking about language. So we approached this website in some senses as a correction of some of the ideas. And then we found a lot of examples to show, you know, how some of the ideas explored in the film could be applied. In this case, we looked at what was considered presidential and finding that changes over time, and that's really interesting. And government, this is the person that I begin the book with. She's chapter 1, story 1, Charlotte Lindy. I don't know if folks have ever come across her work, but she is one of my heroes. Camila Vasquez is another one of my heroes. Charlotte Lindy, as you can see here from her business card, is a socio-rocket scientist at NASA. She created that title. One of the things that's remarkable about her is that she ended up working for NASA twice in 2 very different capacities. And, you know, the projects were not related one to the other. She just has, you know, as she says, been curious, been interested to be interesting. And that has led her into working with NASA on some really important problems of our day. One of the things I love about her story, and it's the reason I wanted to begin the book with it, is she talks about when NASA first called her. She was scared. She was really overwhelmed and intimidated. They wanted her to help them with pilot air traffic control miscommunications, you know, and she had a very real sense that this would be a job where life and death were at stake. And she was really scared. And she describes this moment of feeling the fear and seeing through the fear at the same time. And I love that idea. And I share her story because I want people to know what's happening when they have that moment. If you feel the fear and maybe are able to learn how to see through it at the same time. You know, I hope you all go out and do important things, you know, things that the world, when you look around at the world, things that call your attention as, you know, this is a problem that needs to be fixed. Sometimes those problems are complex and multifaceted and overwhelming and often ambiguous. We don't know the answer because that's why they're giant world problems like climate change. So to be overwhelmed is to be expected, and hopefully you can, you know, 20 years down the line, come back and talk to the next generation of students and talk to them about feeling the fear and seeing through the fear at the same time, because the world needs us. And then, I've been saying it's a good thing to get an internship if you can. This might be a version of an internship that would be a government internship. The Smithsonian Institution has internships that, in some ways they're very like a little mini academia. They have a department of anthropology over there at the Smithsonian Institution. They put on programs like Recovering Voices. Every year they celebrate, I think it's 3 different cultures, languages, for this, to focus for this Recovering Voices exhibition. Healthcare communications is a domain where, like the military, they hire linguists, but in this case, they are asking for people who have been trained to study phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax. A lot of this is because of Professor Emerita at Georgetown, Heidi Hamilton, has done a lot over the years to build understanding of why a linguistic background is so useful to really get a handle on things like doctor-patient miscommunication. She's done a lot of trust building and way making in this field. So you hear about, wow, this social listening, the social media listening for is hiring a linguist. And then if you do a little bit of digging, come to find out they had something to do with an organization like Verilog. And, back in the day, Heidi Hamilton was part of the advisory board helping to create organizations like Verilog to do really careful work with looking at language and how it structures understanding. Tech, we heard about tech in the chat when I was asking how folks were thinking about places they might go. I wanted to tell stories about tech of people who are not techie, people who are themselves, they would never define themselves as techie. So all the stories in my book are people who work in tech who are, they're not doing computational linguistics. They're doing other things. Probably one of the most exciting stories. I learned so much in telling the story about Eli, who works for the Wikimedia Foundation. Wikimedia is the organization that creates things like Wikipedia. But he is a user experience researcher, and he talked a lot about how the ethos of collaboration and, at Wikimedia, it's a non-hierarchical organization, and how that lent itself to the open collaboration and communication that you could see built into the design process. So he described, the design process through the lens of working at Wikimedia, but is a great example of how the culture of an organization shapes how they work and what they produce. And as I say, I learned a ton. So the answer to the question that I often get about, do you have to have coding skills to work in tech? No, you do not. But most people who work in tech say at some point, if you're open to learning it wouldn't hurt. So I guess it's a yes and the answer. It's probably always good to learn more about what your colleagues are working on. It probably makes you a better colleague and collaborator. So education, I'll just tell the E and the N of Brighton, education and nonprofits through Holly, because, in the language of these bright spots, Holly came to me, she had this question: how can I integrate my knowledge about phonemic awareness and reading? That's what she knew. She knew that was a bright spot for her. That was something that made her light up. And this picture from the left is when she was, before she came back to grad school, she was working in a daycare, in, oh, I don't remember where she was now, but she was, this for her was that moment of phonemic awareness, that moment where she could see in the learners' faces that they were recognizing how sounds segment into meaningful units. So she did a giant semantic map of her interest in education and specifically phonemic awareness. And she asked herself, okay, I could go to traditional teacher education. You know, we were in Washington, D.C. at the time. So she was looking for jobs at the State Department of Education or at the schools of education or around the DMV, as they call it, District, Maryland, and Virginia. And then asked herself, oh, yes, well, there's also nonprofit organizations that surround this question of helping cultivate phonemic awareness. And as I'm listing all these organizations, these were all organizations that she applied to. I learned a ton from Holly. Her dad was a career counselor. So as a student, she was able to teach me so much about how to support the job search process. And probably the biggest thing I learned from her is that you get a lot of results when you apply for a lot of jobs. And not just apply, right? In each case, she was working to cultivate relationships and do informational interviews, and so that her applications weren't just going in blind. She in many cases, they were warm applications. Someone knew her, someone on the other end knew who she was and that she would be applying, and they sort of helped her application get to where it needed to go. Okay, then she also knew how things work in the nonprofit world. Grant makers, if you follow the money and see where it goes, this is where you can be very influential in this space of literacy education. So she learned about and applied to some of the big funders who tend to fund literacy nonprofits. She looked into government. This is a way to kind of remember that this acronym Brighton kind of folds in on itself a little bit, because we're in E and we're heading towards N, nonprofit, but we're folding back and looking at government. Everything, these worlds of work, they're all interconnected. And then where she ended up landing was a literacy nonprofit called Reading Partners. So this ends our tour of Brighton with a nonprofit. She ended up doing for this organization what she had done in another organization, which in the nonprofit world is called development, but development means fundraising in the nonprofit world. And grant making actually took her into her next job, which was at NPR, but that's a story for another time. Okay, so hopefully what fuels you is curiosity. You know, we've been talking about various ways that you can try things out. Internships are a way of trying things out, but if you're not in a position to be able to take an internship, think about other ways that you could try things out. What could you do if, you know, I've had students before, you know, they knew they were interested in a particular topic, so they did a research paper on it, then asked themselves who might be interested in this research paper, and ended up sharing that research paper, and that ended up being the thing that got them hired. Because you share a piece of research with someone who's been thinking about a thing and you bring in a new approach, well, if they can, I think people will hire you. They'll make a job for you. So returning to this idea of the bright spots, I wonder if anybody has one that they stumbled upon as we've been talking. Maybe it's tech support. That's something that strikes you as being a problem that you're interested in exploring. Anyone have a bright spot, or you know, these are things that they're challenges that speak to you. When you're given the choice, you know, for a class project or a paper, what do you tend to choose? Your friends and family can probably answer this for you too. When you're working, what tasks are you working on when you lose time? Conversely, they can probably tell you what you're working on when you're the crankiest and most frustrated. Those may be things that you might want to avoid as you plot out your career. Do other people tell you anything about where you come alive? And if you're drawing blanks on these are questions to specifically pose to people who know you, your professors, your classmates, your friends, what do I talk about? What do I seem to be drawn to? I worked, I told you, at Goldman Sachs for 4 years before I came back to grad school. We were given a day a year that we could volunteer our time. I ended up organizing resume clinics every year. And every year I think, no, let's do something different this year. But then when you ask me what was the thing that I wanted to do, I want to do a resume clinic. So that sort of told me that I am interested in the language of career again and again and again. I chose it over and over and over again. So I wonder if anybody's realizing that they have one of those. Anyone want to share? It's fine if people are thinking. Noodle, keep noodling. But specifically, I would have you think about people, organizations, communities that inspire you. Think about research projects that you have been doing in terms of, who are the people, who are the organizations, in the way that Holly did, right? Like, do this concatenating, semantic mapping of all the different organizations and communities that surround a thing that interests you. In the language of this metaphor, you start to see constellations, as I was alluding to, and then those constellations are navigable. Like you can't have any sense of where you are if you just know one star. That doesn't help you get your bearings. But you have a cosmology when you have hundreds and thousands of ideas of what your bright spots are. You map those out, and they can really help you orient, especially in a time like these times that we're in right now, where the cosmology has shifted. Everything is different, and you need to get your bearings again. So I see in the chat, language, identity, discourse, and feminism. I love intersections, online space, and communal inhabitants of those spaces. Yeah, so you have specific, I hear specific research questions in here too. As I said, I tell the story of someone who's worked with Twitter. That was a linguist who just reached out to them and said, you don't have, he never has officially worked for Twitter. He just reached out to them and said, you don't have Twitter available in my language, and I think you should, and I'll support that. So was able to do a lot of work with Twitter to fix a thing that he was passionate about. So yeah, these bright spots, they lead you places. Okay, so I said thinking and talking. This book is about thinking and talking. So we've thought about careers. Now let's think about talking about careers. Where does this come in? So these are the texts that comprise the job search. As I said, as much as the world of work is changing, I don't hear about people not having to write a resume. You're probably gonna have to write a resume. And there are genre conventions to know about a resume that can help you come across most powerfully, most yourself, the most vibrant version of your skills and interests and abilities as possible. And then there are written spiels and there are oral spiels. But basically, those are all just buckets of language, and you can learn about each of these genres in ways that help you shine in each of these presentations of yourself. And just a note that if you're on the academic path, you do create these same kinds of things generally, but instead of a resume, you're creating a CV. You're not maybe on LinkedIn, maybe you're on academia.edu, or folks can tell me I've been out of the academic world for a little bit. Maybe there's other social media platforms that people are using more. But you're still going to have these oral, you're at a conference, you need to be able to talk about yourself. You're going to want to have little examples. You're probably going to go in a job interview and have to answer questions like, tell me about yourself. That's TMAY. That's the classic spiel that I think it bears practicing. And there's formulas that you can learn and master. And storytelling is the key. So I was talking about having having ideas about the things that spark you. They could be a little thing, like, well, language and identity and discourse and feminism are not little things, but if you find a tiny, nugget in there, something very fine, that you could cultivate into a story, I call these little pocket examples, because they're things that I would hope that you have to have them at the ready. They're in your pocket. You can pull them out. And, in a job interview or in a networking conversation where you just say, somebody says to you, what are you interested in? You say, well, let me tell you a little example. In this research project, I was able to, explore XYZ, and I found blah, blah, blah. With these kinds of stories, a formula that a lot of organizations use for storytelling in the job interview context is STAR, STAR, which fits with our metaphor. R is results. You really want to tell stories that show the results. So, I did this research project. This is what I found, and this is how somebody could use these findings. I work a lot with academics who, say, I don't know what the result is yet. I wrote this paper and I put it out there. Sometimes the R is, how could somebody, it's you imagining, how could somebody maybe use the research that you put out there? How could Twitter, what could you tell Twitter about, data preservation? How could you be, thinking for them, with them, showing them that you care about the things that you care about by proposing thoughtful strategies to them, interventions, solutions. Those are pocket examples. Resumes. I love to start here with just, you can't even really see what these resumes are talking about, but you can kind of see, if I asked you which of these is kind of more guiding the reader, do you have a sense which resume seems to have thought more about the reader and how they're going to be navigating this document? The right or the left? You can pop it in the chat or shout it out, popcorn. I know that I get a feeling in my body when I look at these two. One of them makes me feel taken care of as a reader more. All right, I'll answer my own question. The right-hand side, to me, this person has just put a lot more structure. You could call it scaffolding, just like when you write a research paper. There's a lot more signposts here to tell me how to read what's in this resume. For one thing, there's objectives on the top. That's a framing cue that just sort of says, this is how to understand me and who I am. I love to encourage people to use these objectives, especially if they've had a lot of different kinds of work experience or haven't yet had the exact experience that they want yet. Tell the person who's reading this resume how to understand you in this objective. Give them words, give them keywords. You know, think of me as a collaborator. I will collaborate in this context to this end. You can be very directive in your objective. Cover letters. I've been talking about this for years, but I still see mostly cover letters that talk about, I want this job. Right? Like, so think about Twitter. Show them that you're thinking about something that they're worried about, something that's keeping them up at night. You know, you want me on your team because I'm thinking about data security in these ways. I have these skills and this training. And like, I call cover letters a genre of reassurance. Reassure them that you're the person that's going to help them sleep at night. You know, you're the person that they've been looking for. Make them feel FOMO. Networking, we've talked a little bit about networking. It's probably the most important thing when you think about all of this. That's why I developed that metaphor for this book, because people come to me and they're like, I need a job. And the answer that you'll get is go network. And there's a way that that doesn't really make sense. They don't seem to be matched tool to task. But with this metaphor that says, okay, imagine the night sky, right? If you can't see any of the bright spots and you don't understand how they come together, how on earth could you navigate? You know, you need to be, so networking is the thing that gets you, you talk to people, you get feedback, you tell them, I'm really interested in this thing. Have you heard about anybody who does this kind of work? As you're networking, what you're doing is you're generating bright spots and you're starting to organize them. You're generating a cosmology, you know, you're generating the sense-making mechanisms to make sense of your cosmology. So it cannot be, the importance of networking cannot be overstated. So that when you get to something like a job interview, you're ready. You have your pocket examples, you have your stories, you know how to answer, tell me about yourself, which I'll just give you a quick formula. A great way to answer, tell me about yourself, is to start in the present. You know, I'm here at an exciting time in my career trajectory. Jump to the immediate past. You know, recently, as I was working in such and such, it's been the thing that has propelled me to come to this realization. And then you jump to the future. I can see myself at your organization, you know, helping you adopt data security protocols that would, you know, keep our data safer. So present, past, future tense in a 90-second, in a prepared, rehearsed 90-second package is a great way to respond to tell me about yourself. And I still hear tell me about yourself is often the first question you'll get asked. And if you haven't prepared an answer, that can be a very scary question. All right. Unfortunately, I don't think I've left enough time for practice, but I was going to have you all practice. Tell me about yourself, that formula that I just gave. So jot it down, practice it the next time you're at a departmental gathering. See if you can get your classmates to give you some feedback. And one thing to ask about specifically is, am I talking optimistically? You know, when you listen to me talk, do I sound like, you might not feel like it, you might feel anxious, but you need to talk like you're optimistic and you're, you know, you don't have to be, you know, falsely confident. I hate that, but I want you to sound optimistic. Like, I have skills and I have ideas about who needs these skills, and I'm excited about the opportunity to apply them. So we've mentioned What Color is Your Parachute? Another great book, How to Be Everything. Emily Wapnick coined the phrase multi-potentialites. I've found that a lot of us are multi-potentialites. We're interested in a lot of things. Madge, I can see from your answer in the chat, you're a multi-potentialite. You're interested in a lot of different things, and specifically, you're interested in how they come together. So Emily gives some models for what that might look like, because not everybody thinks like a multi-potentialite, but I do think academia cultivates multi-potentialites. And then we're presented, we become square pegs, and then we're presented with round holes when it comes to jobs. So I think it can help you to know how you think and different ways that you might think to be able to, be everything, as she says, everything you want to be. I maintain a list at careerlinguist.com of 50 linguist-friendly organizations. These are organizations that have hired linguists over the years. When I hear from somebody, I kick one of the 50 off and I add one in when I hear from somebody who really loves their job. So this is it's a recent, chances are that if you find one of these 50, that person still works there. Hopefully they're still happy. And I hear back from people. This is year after year the most viewed page of my website, this 50 linguist-friendly organizations. So, and I have heard directly from people that it led them to apply somewhere and get a job. So I think I'm going to stop here. As I say, I'm going to share these resources for you to peruse at your leisure. But I want to just leave a couple minutes for questions, if people have them. Oh yeah, thanks. Careerlinguist.com is the place to find it.
I have a question. I've heard that, especially outside of academia, that LinkedIn is like super, super important. Do you have any advice on that?
Yes, I say it is the world's largest repository of information about work. So remember I said the importance of networking cannot be overstated. LinkedIn it's a database. Think of it as a database. Or start by just going through and looking for people that you already know and connect with them. Sometimes people use it to say, like I was just talking to a group the other day. Berkeley has a lot of events called Beyond Academia, and many of them are open to not just Berkeley students. So this guy he worked for the World Wildlife Fund, and I was like, you and I should connect on LinkedIn, because if someone in your community has a language problem and they put in linguist or language puzzle, I would love to talk to people who work at the World Wildlife Fund who have language questions. So I guess you can think, one of the things to think about as you think about your talk about yourself on LinkedIn in terms of the search queries that you would love to be asked. So if you can put in your LinkedIn profile, I'm interested in climate change and in, the ecology, and if that's true, and if you especially want to be asked questions about, the role of language in puzzles like that. Is that making sense? Okay, there will be a box folder with this recording, and I'll send the slides. So I guess if I have just a minute, I will tell you the thing to do before you leave school. March down to your career center and have done this little thinking about your sparks. Show up there and say, I've been thinking about it, and here's that really get me lit up when I talk about them, when I work on them. I have not yet met a career counselor who wouldn't themselves light up if you bring your query to them in that format. If you've done it before, you may have learned that at career centers, sometimes they break down if you march in there and say, I'm a linguist, what can I do? You know, the way that it was framed at the beginning of this presentation. Sometimes career counselors just don't know. They don't know what linguists do. So reframe it. Frame it as, these are the things that I love, and I want to know who does this kind of thing, who needs the things that I'm excited about, who needs to be thinking about them. So let them help you. And yeah, for most of schools I know of, I don't know about exact dates, but USF probably allows you, even when you're an alum, to come back to Career Center and get one-on-one counseling, get resume feedback. Most schools, they'll let you do it for a year at least after you graduate. So if you didn't take my advice today, tomorrow, do it soon.
So Kevin
So yeah,
asked
I think
a question
yes.
about tips for salary
Oh,
negotiation.
salary. Okay, yes, so many, and I'll just point you towards a reference, which is the Linguistics LCL, Linguistics Career Launch. It was a month-long series of activities and events. They had a panel on salary negotiation that was phenomenal. It was an hour's worth of, someone had a BA, someone had an MA, someone had a PhD, and they all talked about what they did to negotiate salary. And if you can't find it, connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me this specific question, and I will find the specific panel for you. It was a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
And negotiate.
Mhm.
Do it.
I was going to thank you, and I was going to say most of the people in here in my classes are full of questions. So the fact that no one's asking, I think, shows how helpful and thorough your information was. So
And they know how to find me.
yes. Yeah. So last chance, everybody, because we are out of time. If no one else has a question. Okay. Well,
Thanks so much for having me, for your time and your good attention, everyone.
thank you.
Here's to what's next.